as hybrid, so it is.
Can you pull your mic up a little bit closer, John?
It is broadcast via Facebook. And do we have a Zoom? Is it also a Zoom meeting?
Yes, it's also being broadcast on Zoom and on Facebook Live.
Okay.
Or on YouTube Live, I'm sorry.
YouTube. All right. Get it straight eventually. We will offer an opportunity for the public to make comments at the designated time. Would only ask that those comments be held to the matter at hand, and that they be limited to 3 minutes in duration. In attendance this evening is John Myers, the chair, Commissioner Pinckney, Commissioner McEnany, Commissioner Hacker, and Commissioner Kaplan. And we are represented by Martha Mahoney as our legal counsel to keep us on the straight and narrow. I declare we do have a quorum with the 5 members in attendance, so we can proceed with the with our public workshop. That consists of reviewing properties on Clinton Avenue.
John, can you just hold on 1 second?
Yeah. Lights on. Plugged in.
Sorry.
Sounds a little more lively. Well, hopefully, I won't have anything else to say after this. We have, let's see, 78, 133, 303, and 307 Clinton Avenue. Is there, and the matter at hand is a request for the renewal of the 2020 certificate of appropriateness to rehabilitate the 4 structures. So, is there anyone to speak to this matter?
Yep. Dan Hirschberg is representing the project tonight, and Adam Driscoll from Home Leasing is also available for any questions. Before Dan starts, these 78, 133, 303, and 307 Clinton Avenue and 163 Clinton Avenue, which is the following, are renewals. So it is, if the board finds the applications meet criteria, it is just a renewal of what was approved at last year's 2020 HRC meeting. So,
Has anything changed?
no. So Dan, if you want to just briefly give an overview of the project.
Yes. Thank you, Dan Hirschberg. I'm here today representing Home Leasing. These 4 townhomes were previously approved in early 2020, I believe. Unfortunately, they didn't make the last round of the HRC applications. They're highly rated, so we think they'll make this round. But because that time came and expired, we're coming back for renewal of the previously granted certificate of appropriateness. The application on this building hasn't changed at all. The buildings are still going to be rehabbed as shown on the plans. You may recall the original application was made by Jeff McDonald. He was the architect. Can answer any questions the commission may have.
The assumption is that, the representation is that this is it's following what was previously agreed to in the certificate of appropriateness in 2020 that was issued. So you're just requesting to renew and pursue the project based on those original agreements and understandings.
Yes, the original review and approval, we would like that to be renewed.
Okay. And we would just caution that any discovery that's made during the development of the project that might cause a change to the what's agreed to in the certificate of appropriateness, that you would return to the commission to alert us to that fact.
Yeah, we'd be bound by exactly the same conditions as the original approval, sir.
Right. Are there any questions from commission members or any need to discuss this further? I would entertain a motion then to renew the 2020 certificate of appropriateness as is.
I make a motion to renew application as is.
Is there a second? I will second it. Okay. Are there any questions from the public?
Let me just.
Okay, I'll call it to a vote then. All those in favor, please indicate by waving, raising your hand.
All right.
The motion is carried 5-0, so it passes. Next item is 163 Clinton Avenue. It was a similar request.
Mr. Chairman, this is exactly the same situation.
Okay.
This is exactly the same situation. It was previously approved with some conditions, and those conditions plans have actually been changed to comply with those conditions. So we're asking for renewal of that approval, and all the conditions of the original approval have been complied with.
All right, again, are there any questions? If not, hearing none, I would entertain a motion. So move. Second?
Second.
All right. Any comments from the public in this matter? I would call it to a vote. All those in favor? Aye. The motion is carried.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'd like to say I have a photograph from 1905 of Stanford Old School number 7 of the kindergarten class on steps. If you'd like a copy of that, I'd be happy to get you.
I think we'd all like a copy.
Yes, please. If that could be emailed to us, that would be great.
Thank you.
I'll work with Jack to get it. Can I also just ask all of the commissioners, when you're speaking this evening, make sure that the mic is up nice and close so that the microphone for the Zoom participants picks up all the discussion. Thank you. Project.
Next matter that come before us is 108 Mark Street. Is that correct, John?
Yes.
And that is the retroactive certificate of appropriateness for the replacement of a storefront with a new aluminum and glass storefront. And that is one that we saw
In May?
back in May. Okay, a few months ago, and we made specific recommendations or conditions on that.
So this came before the HRC in early May for a workshop where the commission had reviewed and made recommendations. And they are working with Dan Sanders, who will be presenting for the hearing this evening. Let me just make sure. Danny, if you're ready, you can unmute yourself.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. On behalf of the applicant, Soleil, we were asked to work with them, with the uncle and his nephew on the renovation of the Washington Market. And the market itself was renovated without a certificate or any approvals, and brought up the situation as much as possible. So we went through several iterations in design and brought it to Aaron for some review, and we came up with a solution that would maintain the roof line, add a sign at the fascia, and add additional trim on the aluminum storefront that was inappropriately installed. And with that, we've decided to paint the moldings and the new trim all a medium bronze, similar to the door that goes into the apartment upstairs, and treat the trim in a more historically appropriate manner with some crown molding designs, and also just repairing the wood trim of the doors and the glass.
So does each plate glass area have two panes? According to your drawing, it shows a vertical line dividing.
No, that's actually the butt glass. It's the joint of the two pieces of glass. You know, it's really fine. There's no mullion there.
Okay.
You can just see
So
it
you have
here.
two panes of glass that butt up to each other.
Correct. That's the existing glazing.
So that's the existing. Okay.
We're not changing those glazing.
The signs, the images we're looking at, existing, the signs are above that little, pit roof. And, I don't know, can someone get to the elevation down? So that's dropping, the sign is dropping down below that little roof now? Or is it still up on the roof further?
It's actually going to be, yeah, it's only 12 inches down. The actual fascia, that's the fascia board now is about 8 inches, but it wouldn't have enough of an area to really have a sign. So we're taking the sign off the roof and putting it at the fascia, or the lettering, I should say.
Can you go back, Eric?
Does the projection of that roof, is that being retained?
Yes.
Okay. In approximately the same proportion that it is right now.
Yeah, we're keeping the exact form. We're just replacing the shingles in kind.
And then establishing a fascia as a signboard, a vertical
Correct.
fascia. Okay.
Can you go to the elevation again?
Mm-hmm. Maybe.
Actually, it looks in the, you might want to check it. It looks like if you have a 12-inch signboard at the base of that little roof, I think it might be lower than shown on this drawing. You might want to just verify what the height from grade to the underside of the new sign is. It doesn't look like it's identical to the photos, but I can't really tell. And there, on this drawing, it says the sign is 8 inches high. Did you say 12 inches? Or is it the letters are 8 inch high?
The sign is 15 feet wide by 8 inches high.
Right. Can you go back one slide again? Go back to that photo again. Okay.
Eight inches high, we wouldn't be able to read it. That's,
That's about the minimum height that you could read.
Well, it's like 8.5 by 11 is a piece of paper, and this is less than a width of a piece of paper.
I mean, it could be modified. He has, the property is located in residential townhouse district, which allows for a smaller sign, but because it's a pre-existing commercial storefront, historic storefront, they are allowed up to 10 square feet of signage at the property. So it could be modified slightly.
But I don't know where any value for the merchant. We'd be better off, I would think, just to get a good design on the glass windows and forget about something that's in 18 or 15 feet long and only less than a piece of paper wide. That's more trim than the sign.
Actually, if you'll go to the elevation drawing, Jack, my comment was.
I'm not really hearing Jack very clearly, sorry.
Okay.
Pull it up.
It's more like a design of some sort. I don't think we have any use for a merchant to invest in that. They'd be better off to put something on the glass window that you could actually read at eye level. It just looks like a waste of money and sort of clutters up that little protruding roof. It'd be easier just to have a simple roof go out and a piece of molding on the outside of it that's minimum, and then put your design on the window.
And my comment was a little different, but in response to the same. If you go back to the photos, the roof is just a repair of an existing roof, which is not historic and not really compatible. So to some degree, if there was enough square footage available, it's not a bad thing, perhaps, if the sign stayed on that little roof, and roof.
You mean the larger sign that we're seeing in these photographs, right?
A sign, I don't know the size. Gary would have to help calculate the size.
Yeah, it would be 10 square feet.
That's another way to think about the sign.
It seems like there's some options
Yeah.
to appeal the design, again, within the limits
And
of the district.
yeah,
Because the 10 square feet, you can keep that up pretty quickly.
and Dan has kind of included as a mock-up for this, and they would have to come back at some point and apply for a sign permit for the property with the actual design so that it can be calculated and reviewed with the code.
I think when that happens, then the little section through that roof area and how the sign is integrated in it would help. They're going to need something to build it anyhow.
Right.
Then, so you're repairing the existing entry doors, wooden entry doors to the right?
The historic doors,
Yes.
yes, they will be retained and repaired.
What's above the doors? Is it a transom? On this drawing, it shows two panels. Two wooden panels. Is that the way it is now? Or is there a transom, an actual glass transom above that?
I could verify that, or Dan, are you still with us? We may have lost Dan. I can follow up with Dan, or I can verify that.
Because there's a transom, a glass transom, it should be retained.
Or whatever existing elements survive, fill that open, should be retained.
Historic elements.
Yeah.
Can you go to the drawing, please? And if it's not there, what would you?
Those are just a transom, glass transom.
To install the transom
Mhm.
rather than whatever.
Yeah, rather than that.
If there isn't some ceiling behind it, that would look structural. Like a glass transom. More appropriate.
I also think adding the moldings onto that vertical piece between the glass and the entry door, just a little too much.
It's it's tough to understand Dan's drawing right there, whether or not those panels or the applique, the trim, is that just going to be applied to the plywood that exists? Or is there a transom? Is there no transom?
For which,
And the oldest drawing, the oldest was as if there's already something there, and there's a sign hanging up there. It's a no type sign or something.
so what paneling are you speaking about?
Above the doors, I
This?
question whether or not the doors are actually true to the scale of the whole project here, and even the new ones. The two squares above the arch tops of the door, they don't exist.
Well, that's what Lee had just asked to verify that information, so we will verify that information.
And to reiterate.
We're not taking public comment at this time?
And to reiterate that vertical element, yes.
So,
I don't think, it's just confusing with the mold.
Yeah,
They're applied or, you know,
That is the.
it's a little too much. I'd rather see something flush like that.
well, I think one of the recommendations from the workshop in May was that there needed to be some sort of finish work to this vertical panel, because it just was, I think, let me see if I have the close up. It's very unfinished, and it just ends at the entry to the apartment. So
That looks brighter than the vertical element on the drawing. It might be just me.
Is that,
That looks
do
narrow.
we know what material it is and what's behind it?
it's aluminum. It was part of the install for the new storefront system that went in. It's an aluminum panel, yeah.
Is there anything behind it?
My understanding, hold on, let me pull up I think there may be a portion of the existing interior wall between the store and the apartment hall is where it ends. But
It was unfinished.
that could be another, we could verify that. Yeah.
I mean, that new opening on the right side of the entry door to the store is very modified to the size of the dimension they so chose. And then it's as if a piece of banner, a banner just came down, I think. But I think we work with what's existing.
And that is the request of the application, is to retain what is currently existing in the storefront. So it is a review of them requesting to retain the aluminum glass and then add the additional features that Dan has rendered.
Although what we're talking about is retaining most of what was installed. But I think the question we're asking is about that one vertical piece.
I think the discussion was that was such a wide piece that it needed something to break it up and define it a little differently. I think what Dan has done is he's trying to duplicate the width of the trim on the right side of the door with the left side and apply that to that panel so that it brings it into scale that relates more to the door of the apartment. And narrows the apparent width of it as it addresses the storefront.
I guess some better photos will help. It's all in shadow. Can't make out a transform.
That's super photogenic right now.
And all the moldings applied to underneath the point glazing. Are those moldings applied to the surface? Was it an actual wood panel?
I think wood molding, medium bronze, I think it's being applied to the aluminum panels.
Yes.
That's the way I understand it.
Yes.
But it all gets painted to match.
There is a visual difference between applied molding on a flat surface and an actual panel. The panel recedes behind the mold.
Yeah.
Can you go back to the photo here? It's got some reveal, right? It's showing a shadow. I wonder if the moldings are essential.
Well, you have the framing of the aluminum storefront.
Yeah.
And the panel sits back inside that frame in the glazing pipes.
Right, it shouldn't just float in space, if anything, it should be floating
You go back to Dan's drawing on this troublesome vertical piece.
The elevation.
Sorry.
Not necessarily endorsing the panels, but if the panels were to exist, notice how the bottom panel goes down closer to the sidewalk. And does that disrupt the flow? Since it's, on the left, right, and top, it sort of fits a space, whereas it then hits the bottom and drops down. I think it will look cluttered unless it's consistent with one of the lines that's already there to the left.
You're speaking of this proposed panel?
Yeah, it's the bottom line on that. I would think if it was going to stay there, it's going to go up.
If anything, you would duplicate the pilaster that's on the right side of the door on the left side. If the horizontal members aligning with the steps.
Yeah. Well, if you're going to make it look the same way, that it should be a line, the horizontal line should be the same as it is on the right-hand side.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think these are pieces to bring back to the owner and to Dan. It does not feel to me to be in conflict with the first conversation we had, because the first conversation we just had photos. We were just throwing some possibilities out. I think it's progressing.
It would be nice to see if some of that was original door. It would be nice to get a real photograph
Yes.
instead of what we have in the shadow.
Yeah.
Do we need to make the site visit?
Which corner is this on?
This is on the east side of Lark Street, Orange,
Southeast block.
northeast corner. Oh, yes, sorry, yes.
Is it Orange Street?
It's Orange Street, yes.
I'll go by, but I think I'd rather that we have kind of files also, and for whoever's not able to,
Yeah.
photographs of the door, of the transom. See if we can find out more about what's behind that vertical panel. Aluminum, and
Do that.
then the other items.
I saw there might be room in there, but yeah, what they chose to do without a permit or whatever. Just, I mean,
Yeah, I'm not sure.
it's a modern take.
I'm not sure that the molding is, once we're starting to, yeah,
It's,
context, I don't know that the molding is helpful.
I don't think so. Sort of like a false attempt, to make it a start.
Well, we can definitely go back and have a conversation with Dan.
What happened to him?
I don't know. He's
He fell asleep. That's what he did.
he's showing up on Zoom, but he doesn't seem to be. I don't know if he's having connection problems.
It was a little garbled.
Yeah.
Maybe he's on vacation.
Someplace with-
Yeah.
That'd be nice.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, hey Dan.
All right, Dan, you're at.
I think I was in a bad spot. So why don't, I did hear everything, and I'm sure that, we can get more detail if there needs to be a site visit, whatever. Obviously the owner wants to keep moving. So if we can clarify on site, which I'd be more than happy to meet a couple members down there, or however Aaron wants to proceed.
Yeah,
And
I think
the board
it's.
will proceed. That's fine.
And you heard the whole discussion, even though.
Pretty much, yes.
Okay, good.
I didn't realize I was not until I looked back on my screen, but yes.
Great.
Well, we want to table this and pending a site visit.
I would make a motion to have someone make a motion to defer, and then we'll defer the application.
I move to defer the application until our next meeting. Assuming we have the materials as requested.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Dan,
Okay.
I will reach out to you and we'll coordinate.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for your input.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Take care.
We'll drive by on our way home.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. What did I do? Sorry. Sorry, bear with me.
Well, that's positive. It's not getting out and.
No, I think Dan interpreted the message that was delivered, I know at the last meeting or some of the comments that he delivered. But he wasn't at that meeting, so he was going to have the benefit of discussing the details back and forth. Architecturally, just the words.
And we didn't have a drawing.
Right.
Give me one
But I think
second.
looking at it, in situ is going to help quite a bit.
So we will. Let me figure out how to do this.
The next matter on our agenda here is to discuss the emergency action report that the HRC is delivering to the mayor's office and on the council for the adjustment to the local law and.
Do you want to go through it or what?
Well, basically, we Aaron and I pulled the gist of this together from the reports, the two reports that we got from the Buildings and Regulatory Compliance Department. Some of the observations contained here, basically the first part of this is a preamble that identifies the kind of the purpose and the background behind the report, ties it together with the historic preservation plan as well. And then we summarize, we go through the goals that were identified in the historic preservation plan, and then we summarize the general findings from the demolitions. There were 5 emergency demolitions that were conducted in the historic districts. 2 of them were in the South End Rosebeckville Historic District, and 1 was in Upper Clinton Avenue. The other one was in
Right up here.
the Lexington Avenue district, and 1 in the Arborville Triangle. They were all emergency demolitions. We received structural reports on 2 of the actions. 3 of them we have received no report to date.
If you add up all that's dated construction, it's like 750 years of history lost. Something like that. Yeah.
And 15 Lexington is really, I mean, that's probably one of the most unfortunate ones because it, was a building that was a continuation of a row of buildings all at the same time. And it's the gray building with the red X on it. And it appears from the Google Earth image that I grabbed that there must have been a collapse in the back of the building. But again, we don't have a structural report.
Correct.
We don't know what the circumstances were. So part of the report is saying that you need to really fill in the blanks and get a better understanding of what transpired and why these became emergencies, and the only emergency option available was demolition. Because back when this was the blue farm, that building was being in excellent condition in 1985. So it's really an unfortunate loss.
John, I have some edits that, and just organizations that
Yes.
I did to Aaron. But I would think that the most useful part of this conversation would be to look at the recommendations.
Yeah, I mean,
Certainly any other comments both passed it to Aaron.
part of our charge was to provide some recommendations based on what we're seeing. I mean, the first one is that buildings and regulatory compliance should provide all of the reporting information that's identified in the local law and the revisions to that, and the code to govern the building department, so that we have all of the information in hand that we've been asking for. As well as the photographers. The one thing I did discover in going through the list of buildings is that, Google Earth Street View images, are reasonably up to date. And if you catch them right after the building has been demolished, the images that you get are of the building pre-demolition. So those images were all captured in the report. But then, well, I guess we just read the PRC and the HRC should develop minimum standards for areas of building that are truly exposed as a result of the demolition of an adjacent property. And this is the whole issue when there are continuous rows or there's a building that's demolished and there's a neighboring building, that steps be taken to stabilize, make durable and weatherproof the exposed faces of the neighboring buildings so that there isn't a progression of loss beyond the one element that is lost.
I think we should add to that, second sentence, the cost of repairs to create a structurally sound and durable and watertight, because on Madison Ave, that was a series of one building went and then the next one came after that. So we got to this item because of weather tightness, but we should remember to add structurally sound as well.
Yeah, because foundations can be undermined during demolition, unknown, or they can uncover conditions that they can formally conceal that need to be dealt with. So it really is, if there is a demolition, that the stabilization and reinforcement of the neighboring buildings has to be part of that demolition operation. And one thing that came out of our discussions, it would be good to take a look at a longer term view, a look back at history, and see how neighborhoods have been affected. Because, interestingly, the two areas where the demolitions occurred, two were in the south end, which has already been very hard of demolitions over the years. Quite a challenge neighborhood. And the Clinton Avenue corridor has a lot of challenges. Obviously, the home leasing is doing a tremendous job right on Clinton Avenue, but there are kind of shoulders to Clinton Avenue. And what we found was when we looked at the mapping of the citywide demolition, which numbered 24 actions, I believe, 22 demolitions and 2 stabilizations.
Correct. Yeah.
And the majority of those demolitions occurred in very close proximity to established historic districts. They weren't scattered all over the city. 10 of them were within 3 blocks of the Clinton Avenue corridor, which indicates that there's even those shoulder districts that are on the verge or they're in study areas and eligible, could be eligible for designation, but they are threatened as well. So the threat continues beyond just the historic district. So it's the map, the larger mapping, the citywide mapping is very telling. And 2 of the demolitions occurred in 2 areas where survey work has already been completed. Delaware Avenue and the Central Avenue, Bradford Street corridor. And so that means that there are some challenges there as well. But the whole thing is to work with the BRC and with Sam Wells and the vacant buildings registry to really understand what are the threats and try and get ahead of this in terms of being proactive and targeting and identifying buildings that are threatened before they become in lost cause and the subject of emergency demolition. Let's see. Increased staff and funds dedicated to stabilization and direct support of building stabilization by small property owners, owners. And I think the examples of corporations were successfully rehabilitating a lot of the areas that was hold near and dear to that model. Works very well. Look to opportunities to kind of renew that model. There were two kind of funding streams that we thought would be helpful to explore. Funds collected in the vacant building registry right now goes into the general fund. And if that could go into a revolving fund for stabilization, dedicated to stabilization opportunities, that certainly would be a good use of those funds, and the vacant building registry kind of directly informs that, so it has a synergy associated with it. Also recently there was an article in the Times-Union where the mayors of Albany, Schenectady, and Troy talked about the site in Troy, but it was regarding the zombie properties, the New York State zombie properties law, and how fighting those the loss of properties that fall into the zombie category, financial institutions that do very little to provide the appropriate maintenance so that those don't fall into the demolition of life category. And there are, under that law, there are ways of, I guess, establishing fines or forcing the property owner, the financial institution, or whatever the property owner is to make those repairs, or to use funds, make the repairs, and then charge them for it.
Correct.
So again, we support the efforts of the city and a rigorous enforcement of the New York State zombie property law. We also wanted to call attention to obviously some areas that have been on our radar for a long time. The Kenwood Convent School, Central Warehouse, the Holland Avenue Tutors, First Prize Center. There are a number of sites that have been identified. And many of them are in distress. All the tutors have red X's on them. So they're threatened in a number of ways. And following through with the historic district designations, based on what's in the historic preservation plan, so that when we do add historic districts or nominate districts to be designated, that the economic advantages that accrue to that are available for the preservation of those neighborhoods. And then really just committing ourselves, the buildings and regulatory compliance, and the Albany County Land Bank to work together to combat this problem, because we all have common interests Ours is not just limited to the historic districts, but we have an interest in the city as a whole. Some of the trends that have evolved. So that was my quick takes. Not so quick take. Yeah.
I have one more to add that we lost. I can email it to you if you want. Something like, it's got timing. It's about how long it takes for the whole code compliance process and reports and violation inspections. Something like a full assessment of required and actual timeframes associated with inspections, issuance and follow-up of violations, court actions, and repairs or emergency stabilization or demolition should occur. Saving buildings requires immediate remedial actions on conditions found to be unsound. Something like that.
Yeah.
And I think we know from the previous conversations that there's court issues. I don't know the timing. We know there's a new codes court now dedicated. So I think there's a whole slew of timing issues that need to be understood and then expedited. So I'd suggest that we add something like that.
Okay.
I think it's certainly something that needs to be explored. So many times, continuances, are granted that just kind of protract, roll out the whole again.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want the courts involved in the demolition by the collapse. So, shortening timetables, getting things moving quickly so that the properties are in distress, they can be dealt with effectively.
Yeah.
I could also suggest,
Can you pull your mic in a little bit, Jack? Your mic.
I think a lot of people have different levels of expertise on what's a valuable piece of property and what is not.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that would shock some people would be the absolute age of some of the buildings. Now, Marilyn just mentioned 760 or some odd years of history has just been destroyed. And obviously somebody has a number. And I think probably the most damning thing from the 5 examples that we gave of what's going on in this year is the Lexington Avenue for its beauty, its effect on its neighbors, etc. But it's also the most costly demolition. $63,250 is substantial. Nothing is even close to that. It would not hurt to put in something about the building. At the very minimum, its date. I assume I'm not sure. It could be the 1890s, it could be as early as 75. I think we probably know what the history is on that road. And I think it would shock some people to actually see that date.
Well, they show, the dates are there, but they're kind of buried in the context. I think they're there, but they're buried in the context of all the other information, right?
Oh, I see the date of construction over there.
And they should be, there should also be, I went through, there's a brief, so part of the requirement of the reporting is doing kind of a brief statement of significance or history of the building. And I think,
I wonder if the date should be made more prominent, so it's right next to the name of the building.
okay.
Yeah, and then we'll also represent buildings that date back to 1840s.
You know, I honestly didn't even catch it.
Right.
I kept looking at the left-hand corner of the address and then what the cost was of the demolition. The date is part of the identity, much the same as number 15.
We're gonna have a little total underneath
I
that
was-
list of costs.
Yes, that's
Say,
200,000, yes,
5 buildings have cost you $215,000.
Yes.
To demolish.
In this cost of demolition, of each demolition, are we also taking into account how much money goes out to pay overtime, staff and employees?
Chris, can you turn your mic on?
Well, the cost of demolition was reported, I think, is the bid that they get from the demolition contractor that comes to the site and proposes.
Yeah, I'm curious about how much is actually paid out to overtime to supervisors that supervising them. And how accurate are these numbers?
Well, I mean, there are costs to the city, I mean, very real costs. But, not only personnel time, but just,
remember the study 5-ish years ago, Mr. Albany's study and the cost of demolition and that?
Well, and I think was there not a Times Union article about 4 or 5 years ago also?
That's still exactly.
So these numbers are much higher.
Right.
Yeah, the numbers that are the numbers are provided within the emergency or the emergency action notification that's provided from the building department. And it's the quote that's provided by the demolition firm. So they have to supply that information as public information in the notification. But that is just the base. And I think one of the recommendations that John and Marilyn had put in was also getting the cost for treatment of neighboring adjoining buildings. So that should also be either noticed within that total cost of what it would cost for treatments, for making it weather tight and securing it.
and I think part of that is having, the demolition contractor is qualified to demolish a building. They're not necessarily qualified to repair a foundation and rescale a wall. So there are different skill sets that should be employed to really deal with the total ramification of demolition and the total cost of demolition, consequent costs.
So we could include a sentence that speaks to that the five demolitions represent $222,000, excluding staff time and other subsequent costs necessary. And dare we say, dare we tally up that last column and say, and we've lost, and that's a pretty interesting number to say that we've lost a collection of 740, whatever the math is, years of history. And that's, dare we include that in here?
Yeah,
Sure, why not? Yeah.
it's all valid points.
Do the demolition costs include seating, like flattening the site and seating? You know?
I do not know because I've never actually seen, I don't believe it does. I think it's for the removal of the building and the removal of materials after the building is taken down.
It doesn't matter, I can just write it.
I think I've only ever received, and it might have been with 540 Clinton Avenue where it was the notification, the engineer's report, and then the actual bids from the number of firms that went out to look at the site. But I don't believe it broke down exactly what was entailed within that scope of work.
And they fill in grade or something,
They do.
but it's not compacted structural fill. It's just to fill in basements and make it safe.
Right. And then usually it's, I know that for like land bank properties in the past for demolitions that you all have reviewed, you generally place a condition that the site should be, I think, seeded and maintained. I think for most emergency demolitions, the sites are just covered with like chipstone. So there's no grass treatment of the site afterwards.
Who prescribes the fix to the adjacent buildings that may be affected with demolitions? Is it the structural engineer, is it building or
I believe it's part of the structural engineer. So I believe that the structural engineer, after the demolition, goes in and does an assessment of the neighboring structure.
However, an active situation, which I got tangentially involved in, I was talking to Aaron about it, is a demolition that occurred at Albany and Clinton in South End. And the party wall, the party wall was left in very poor condition. And between COVID and perhaps other conditions, no work was done on that building.
For about a year,
At least a year.
at least a year.
And the owner reached out to Albany, was trying to work through it. Finally, some repairs have been done and we will go to see, but essentially it's interior brick is my suspicion. So I don't know, really good question, who prescribes that and is it appropriate? And the recommendation that we have perhaps could be more descriptive, but that's what it's trying to say. That should be part of the policy.
And someone qualified to make those judgments.
Correct.
Other suggestions, improvements?
I notice on the photograph,
Yes.
it's very easy, like on page 17, to have no idea what you're looking at, because the address is not on that page anymore. And it doesn't say what the building is.
I can go, yeah.
It's a little formatting.
Yeah, there's,
We're gonna do a little pagination with it.
Well, and the other thing that happens too is when we wind up with page 15, for example, and there's a good state inventory photograph from 1983. Once again, it should have Delaware Street written underneath it again. In this case, if I go up to the upper left-hand corner, I know it, but unlike 17, I have no indication of look for another page. Whenever those, and I notice the state inventory ones tend not to have the name of the building. So if you're just zeroing in on page 13, for example, I have to remember what I was reading to understand which building we're talking about. And then I look and I see a Sanborn that down below, and I'm assuming it's on Second Street somewhere, but I've lost the content. So when that picture just above is there, it should be very clear that what I'm looking at is something other than just the fact that it's a state inventory.
I can add those addresses so that it is
At
easier.
the risk of being redundant.
It's a working draft, so these are all good recommendations.
Did they do mine?
Friday.
Oh, Friday.
Friday. We've got 48 hours, Marilyn.
And I'd like to thank the authors of this wonderful report, and I hope it gets us somewhere. I really do.
So this on Friday,
It's been a real eye-opener.
yes.
You know, we talk about demolition, we bring our hands, but I mean, part of the mapping exercise is very telling.
Yes.
Because otherwise, it's just anonymous numbers and addresses. But when you see addresses in kind of clustered areas, you know where the threats are. And those may be the areas that you'd look a lot harder for evaluations of current building stock, try and take action to, proactive action to prevent or stabilize.
Yeah.
Sorry, it was just,
I do want to say that we gathered a lot of information. We spent quite a bit of time to understand wells and to Rick and Roy. We're very impressed by the efforts that they're doing, which are not really our charge, but it's all related. So we did talk about kind of keeping this one somewhat narrow and continue staying active on the topic, I think, and expanding it.
Yeah.
But they're trying hard in the moves that they, well, even though they didn't give us
It'd be interesting to kind of graph it,
Yeah.
historically, to see what the trend line looks like on demolitions. Not for this report.
You had the opportunity to look at some of the structural reports before the buildings were demoed, or?
Not before. The structural reports usually come in, after.
they come in, well, the two that we have received have come in with the notice. So 540 Clinton Avenue, which was, I shared with you in March, and then 32nd Street, they came in with the notification that the demolition was going to be taking place. The other three we have yet to receive. And Maryland did make the recommendation. I think it's under Maryland. Do you remember? Hold on. It's in your packets. I think it's number one, actually. Yeah. We recommend that they be provided within 10 days.
I think all departments would grow if they open this in a larger discussion.
How many different engineers do those reports do?
The reports that we received came from Russ Reeves. But I believe that the other three may have been either one other individual engineer, or may have been multiple engineers. I'm not quite sure. I can go back. I'll go back and I'll look.
Is the building department owed on the three that didn't have structural reports? Is the building department owed the structural report on those, or were they of such an emergency nature that they didn't go that step?
My understanding is that it's required that for each emergency action, a report must be produced. It doesn't seem that there's a timeline. I know when I reached out to the building department and just inquiring about the other three emergency or structural reports, they said that they hadn't received them and they would provide them when they were submitted to the building department. But it is my understanding that it is a requirement of the process.
Well, once this hits the press, sit down and have a discussion. Share our observations.
So, what's your schedule so we can receive comments from from the other commissioners?
If
I will be out of town working tomorrow, but I'll be back Friday.
Okay.
So
we can
till the end of the day Friday.
we have till the end of the day on Friday. So I would say if you could have any comments, if you review this and have any comments, additional information that you would like to have added, or if there's anything that you see that needs to be clarified, I would ask 10 a.m. on Friday, if that works for everybody. And that way we would have till the end of the day to integrate everything into the document and submit it to the Common Council and the mayor's office by close of business on Friday. So this is generally, these will be submitted in April. So going forward, it'll be an annual report that's submitted to the Common Council and to the mayor's office on April 1st every year, reviewing the previous year emergency actions throughout the city. Because the laws were adopted March 1st this year, we had reached out to the Common Council and the mayor's office and just letting them know that we would be doing this one-time kind of mid-year review to get a feel for what needed to be included in the report, whether we're headed in the right direction. And I'm hoping that we will receive some feedback from the Common Council on, whether there's different information that needs to be included or, their general feelings towards the commission's recommendations.
What committee of Common Council does this go to?
My understanding, it just goes to the Common Council, so I think it goes to every member of the Common Council.
No, the old expression is when everyone's in charge, no one's in charge.
Right.
I would hope for either this Common Council or the new one starting this January, there should be an individual who is the chair of the committee or subcommittee that deals with the storm preservation.
This did come out of the Land Use Committee, correct, Brad? So
Planning, economic development, and land use kind of basically chairs that is leading the council. So
right.
Chair.
I think that we've identified a new task for us also. So we've got ongoing work with BRC. I think there's a bit of a shared responsibility, but more important, and the way we do that, is we said here, it's our, maybe annually, we should be the ones who say, these are here's our list for the year. And we're looking for compliant efforts for those buildings, the most important buildings around. So that's something that we can talk about organizationally, different, how to go about that.
Kind of attempt to say it first.
Yeah. I have a feeling there's an article in French today about I mentioned it earlier about book compliance and Schenectady and
Yes,
they threw out a lot of those.
yesterday as well. It's still in the corner.
Let's go here.
Yeah.
I'll suspect the timing on this might be advantageous because if I was any other city nearby, I would be looking to make sure that the procedures around code compliance and violations indeed are correct. If that's what they threw around, they said the procedure. Did you see that one?
I didn't.
Yeah.
10 of them were crossed out.
I have sorry, before we go into that, I have one thing, John. This, Zach Powell had given this to me today. It's a seeker lead agency agreement. Just hand it over to you. You just need consent.
This is from the City of Albany Planning Board, Coordinated Environmental Review, Lead Agency Agreement. 9195 Extension Street. They are seeking the City of Albany Planning Board to serve as the lead agency for seeker.
Correct. So we just need to consent
What do we know about 91, 95?
It's the building on the corner of Clinton Street and, let me pull it up where it's all, there, well, let me pull up the site. Oops. So the current property owners, 91 Clinton Street, is this property right here. It's a storefront on the first floor and residential units on the second floor on the corner of Clinton and 4th Avenue. The applicants are looking to rehab this structure and open a catering and restaurant business on the first floor. And they're also looking to construct 2 new structures on the vacant lots in a row house style. So what they're currently looking for, they'll be coming to the HRC for a certificate of appropriateness, possibly for, I have to go through their application more thoroughly, but it looks like repair of, excuse me, the existing windows and the storefront. So this building may be treated for a minor certificate of appropriateness just for retention of materials and minor repairs. But it will definitely come before the HRC for the construction of the new properties at 93 Clinton Avenue or Clinton Street, I'm sorry, and 95 Clinton Street. They're also going before the planning board for a zoning map amendment. The properties are currently residential townhouse, and they're looking to have the properties rezoned as mixed-use neighborhood edge in order to allow for the commercial use and the existing storefront. And then I believe conditional use and development plan review. I think there's a conditional use in there someplace. But this is one of 3 existing storefronts, and I believe that this may have also had a storefront. This building has now been demolished.
Can you swing around because 89 Clinton that I was talking about before with the demolition and exposed
This property.
That's the building, this is taller than the building, that's the one that's gone.
Yeah. So the planning board will be the lead agency for seeker. So we just need an agreement that everyone is okay with that.
I would entertain a motion to agree to designate the planning board as the lead agency in the matter of 9195 Clinton Street. Understanding that any work that does take place there will come to the HRC for review. So move. Second. In favor? Aye.
Okay, thank you.
I can sign up.
Now you can go to public comment.
And we have, now are we ready for the?
Yep,
Someone who has signed up, reading the policy.
Yep, and it should be on, Lee. If it's not, just hit it so it's green. Okay.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the work that you do. I'm a resident for about 6 years, 69 First Street in the Tenbrook neighborhood. And I wanted to discuss briefly the rehabilitation of the porch that's occurring next door at 71 First Street. Pardon me, I didn't know I could speak tonight for that here. But before I go into that, a year ago today, actually, 3 houses on my street were demolished. And living in and caring about historic Albany can be really hard on your house.
Well, there's a quote.
Our neighborhood association put together a subcommittee, and we looked at that a lot, similar to what you guys are doing, but we were on our own without any effect. And we tend to do the conclusion that unless there's a mechanism to take over ownership of those properties before they're demolished and find buyers for them, they're going to continue to get demolished no matter what we do. And if we did that, I mean, none of them would have gotten demolished because I'm out gardening and investors are always cruising that street asking me from outside, is that building for sale, is that building for sale, including those that were demolished. But I digress. A contractor owns 3 houses, or 2 houses on my street, and was hired by a New York City owner of the property next door, who I know because I've been maintaining and gardening in her yard for several years. I was concerned because they had done, in my opinion, poor work. It got through with some hiccups, a certificate of appropriateness and approval last year at 61 First Street. I can go into detail on that, but I won't now unless asked. When they started the renovation of the porch at 71 First Street, I didn't notice a certificate of appropriateness posted, but Aaron has informed me that they have one. It sounds like a minor certificate of appropriateness for repair in kind of the porch. But I came out last week and they had ripped off the entire tongue and groove floor of the porch and threw it in the yard. And then we're replacing it with decking materials, 2x6s that are pressure treated. I asked one of the workmen about it and he said, no, this is a better material. They didn't use it back then because it didn't exist back then. But based on my research and understanding, you know, these New Orleans style porches, there are 4 in a row, my building, this one and 2 others. There are only about 10 of these in Albany as far as I know, and they're really unique and special to Albany. I doubt any one of them has 2x6 floor for their porch. And the porches are angled out and watertight so that I'll get 6 inches of snow on my porch regularly in the winter, even though there's a roof. That snow melts and drains off the angle and then the rest evaporates. And they all have a garden entry below that, if the rain fell through, as it does with decking material, would get moldy and damp and be problematic. More than that, the porch next to mine has a roof on the underside of the ceiling to the garden level entry on the underside of that porch. So if that rain falls through that deck, it's going to accumulate above that roof and mold and rot. So I can't imagine that was appropriate for a minor certificate of appropriateness. It probably should have been major and had a hearing to discuss these issues. They're charging ahead. The inspector who tends to, in my opinion, approve things, even though they're clearly in violation, has come out and said that that's fine, that they can do that. I don't think that's an inspector's role to approve that. That's what I heard from the owner today. Moreover, they've done other things. That, for example, the boards in front of the stairs, every instance I've ever seen is of 1 board. They put 2 boards there and split it up. The rail was oddly high. They put in the 2 rails and the balusters. They ripped them out of the weekend and then put longer ones in so that the porch is more appropriate. Because the original balusters were octagonal and quite nice, and the new ones are pressure treated 2x2. In addition, I have to get my porch done, and I had a contractor come to give me an estimate. He was worried that I lived next door and was worried that I had started on that porch because the posts that the porch sits on are rotted. And for whatever reason, those posts are not being repaired or replaced. So that new deck sits on rotted posts. So it's just a whole host of problems. And as an Albany community resident, the building has not been occupied since I've lived there. It's in overall good shape, except for the porch, which is in poor shape. There's a lot of interest. I can't count how many people have expressed interest in purchasing this house and repairing it. So it's not like lucky to have a fixer. But,
Is there a permit posted?
there is a demo permit posted on the porch, but no COA posted. And Aaron tells me that I could ask to see the COA, but I have an uncomfortable relationship with contractors, and it was very awkward for me to go ask to see the COA. And the COA isn't, I don't understand the COA. I understand there's supporting materials and maybe there should be pictures that go with it. I wouldn't know any of those things.
Right.
I could go into great detail on 61st Street and the trials I went through to get that partially compliant. It still has in front a chain link fence that was removed, damaged, replaced. It still has spray painted windows because they rapidly spray painted the house. It still has an enclosed porch. I can't speak for Aaron, but the language in the COA for 61 First Street said that they should reopen the previously altered enclosed porch. When I called about that, the inspector told me basically a rehab house is better than a vacant house. You should be happy that it's been done. And then the inspector also said the language there was very unclear in that COA. In my opinion, that's good enough. My understanding from having a friend who tried to put on an enclosed porch is that enclosed porches are the problem. And I guess as an Albany resident, I've looked for the requirements. And one neighbor up the street that wasn't allowed to replace vinyl with vinyl siding. This one, 61 First Street, they replaced vinyl with vinyl. I don't know where that rule is. I don't have any idea what these rules are. I would like to have better access to those. If I have an issue, I'm almost beaten to apathy and shouldn't address them because it takes so much effort and time. I don't know really, I call Aaron, I call the boy, I call the state council, and I don't know what's the proper method for this. And also, it's difficult. I'm trying to maintain good relations with this neighbor who made me move there. One of the workers said to me the other day that they work closely with this inspector, and should I do my porch, she'll probably make me tear everything out, which I didn't really know how to interpret that, except for to try and encourage compliance and maintain the historical integrity of these buildings from somebody who sits at this table is in kind of the front line. It's very difficult, very confusing, it's very challenging, and you feel like you're beating your head up against the wall. I don't ask for more than to know what the rules are and have everybody follow the rules equally. And when I do my porch, which I need to do, I expect it to be expensive, I expect it to be complicated, I expect to have clear rules that I will follow. But I also think that there's an opportunity with every renovation to not maintain the level, but to improve it how it once was or should be. And that's what I would like to see, and that's what I'm trying to achieve on my street, that I've been frustrated. I came tonight just to hear how this works, and I'm happy to have the opportunity to address that.
And Lee, I can address, I apologize, I've seen that you've been calling, I've been out for a family,
No more than 1,000.
out for a family emergency, so I apologize. And I will provide you with a link for the information. For the neighboring property at yours, it is my understanding that they have stopped work because it does appear that their minor certificate of appropriateness was issued based on the documents that they provided, then the material would be retained and repaired. I don't know if there was a miscommunication between the project managers and the contractors, but project managers have reached out. We will be working with them to bring it into compliance.
So if I may,
Yep.
I didn't see the inspector there today, but the owner and I chatted on her yard. I was helping her with some gardening on front. And she said the inspector said there was some problem with the stairway, that the 2x6s would stay, that she approved those. I don't know if that's accurate or not.
Well, I can tell you that was not approved as part of the certificate of appropriateness. So they will have to come into compliance with the certificate of appropriateness. And
they filed a minor certificate and said that it was repairing time, but it's not, so now it should become
so the process would be they can either go back and, if the material is still on site, either reinstall the material or match it, but they're not going to comply with the certificate of appropriateness, then they would come back to the HRC.
So Aaron, the other stuff is going to stop the process.
I will check with Eileen. I haven't been able to follow up with her.
That's your expectation?
Yes, that there should be. Yeah.
So I don't want to take too much time. I know I'll be up here next. The issue with 61 First Street was that I had just had a conversation with another neighbor who was, friendly, complaining that you guys had made them replace vinyl siding with wood siding. Soon after, I saw 61 First Street with the siding removed, so I took a picture of it. This is about a year ago, And then I noticed them continuing work, putting siding up. And so I called and I was told there was no certificate for that. But the inspector sent an email and said, the owner tells me, they're copied on this email, the owner tells me that they haven't done anything that more than, touched this, they didn't replace it, which was not true at a minimum, but they still presented this. And, they did this, they eventually, because I did foil and pursued it for a year, eventually replaced the siding with wood siding. They didn't open the porch. And there was no permit for the fence, as I understand it. But they're kind of clear. So they successfully navigated that. And they're repeating this. And so is there any penalty for contractors who do this kind of thing? Because this looks like it was registered as a minor certificate, and they intended to tear out and replace materials that were not in kind. So, I don't know that they can comply with the minor certificate because it should be a certificate, in my opinion.
And we can I will look into that. So, and, work with them so that it does come into compliance. I mean, based on the information that they had provided with their permit application, it fell into the minor certificate of appropriateness review because it was just.
We're putting more information in this. Is there any disincentive to do that?
Well, so, right. I mean, what can happen is that if someone violates a permit or a certificate of appropriateness, stop work orders can be issued at the site. Those stop work orders do incur fines, and they can be daily or, a one-time fee. And if you avoid either paying those fees or coming into compliance, it does then get elevated to that person being brought to court and having to then go through the court process. And either coming into compliance or facing further fees. So.
I appreciate that. The second, I'm only familiar with two properties this contractor worked on, and both of them there was similar kind of
yes.
And without inordinate effort and a significant cost to me, they just get through that. And so there's a strong incentive to kind of under-describe work or misrepresent what was done. And I feel that's clearly what's going on here. And I've been frustrated because I haven't heard directly from the inspector, but the landowner told me that the inspector said, oh, that's approved and that's not. And it just doesn't seem like that would be their role.
Who is this inspector? Is it the building department?
It would be from the building department. Yes.
I'm not going to say the name, you can get that separately.
Yeah.
But it's the same inspector that sent the email saying that the siding wasn't touched. It's the same inspector that these workers that they work very closely with, and it would make me rip out my porch. She didn't say that, the inspector didn't. That the workers felt comfortable enough to say that to me. So it's, it's become quite uncomfortable.
Thank you for coming and thank you for taking your time.
Sure.
And Erin is the correct person. She's key to opening the process and whatever procedures.
Sure.
But thank you very much.
Okay. I appreciate it.
Yep. So, and we meet every other Wednesday. So. Yep.
Speak with Lee and have a conversation in the morning and try and follow up on the issue, but I just want to remind everyone that the historic preservation plan, that was one of the action items that's called out to have a preservation specialist item among the building inspectors that have a little bit more background.
Yeah. No, I was thinking the same thing, but that was one of the recommendations. We can add it to our list.
There you go. And I would also say, there have been a number of occasions where we have discussed the historic building section of the building code, and that where for historic properties, the maintenance of historic materials that don't necessarily.
In the existing building code?
Yes, in the existing building code.
Oh, yeah. I know
That-
very well.
Right.
I don't know that it has to do with vacant buildings, but.
No, it doesn't have to do with vacant buildings, but to Lee's point where, material, is for historic properties, sometimes there's a misunderstanding that if it's existing material and it's being retained, it doesn't have to be removed in order to be brought up to the modern building code. That would impact the historic character of the building if we would have to bring all railings up to 36 inches and, and things like that.
There's very few repairs in the existing building code, state existing building code for repair.
Correct.
And then, and even when you move into the levels of alteration or change of occupancy, you want to do project, there are still some special provisions.
Correct.
Yeah.
I very much think that we're in need of a preservation specialist as inspector.
Speak up.
One that goes out and does check compliances on certificate of appropriateness that we look at and discuss. Someone could be there to discuss their project, how to help them move forward with their project. Not backward, but forward. Yeah.
I would add that to our list in the context of starting with making buildings. That's our charge.
Yeah. You guys done a great job right in that far.
Yeah, that.
Great.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
You're going that building. What's going on at Ralph's Tavern?
So,
Hold on a second, so everyone knows.
Yep.
Corner of Madison and Scotland, the southwest corner. There's a stair tower going up to the roof. There's new doors.
So the material there, that was also a minor certificate based on the criteria from the historic resource overlay, that they did provide photographic evidence of replicating historic material. So the building previously had like a weird, like portico type door on it, where based on historic evidence, it had a single light, nice like wood single light entry door. So they were. We'll get there. Yep. So.
The door that went in is not a nice door.
I was also a little surprised, yes.
I'll look at it then, because it
What
should.
about the rooftop construction?
So.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll look at that. The rooftop stair tower, I take full responsibility for that. That was my oversight. The plans that they had provided with the renderings, it was not visible, at least, or what they had provided, it showed that it would not be visible. And it was much closer to the front of the building than what I had reviewed. So it did get approved, and that was my oversight. So.
Are you comfortable sharing with us and or our review of, given that it's there, the materials and the details of that?
Yes. Yep. We can do that.
I'm sure you consider this, but it might make an argument in the future for precedent. Right. Across the board.
Can you repeat yourself, Chris?
Follow suit. I would like to expand all.
Well, the thing is that there are multiple buildings throughout the city of Albany that have rooftop decks, and you would never know because they're not visible. And it's the parapet and the structure and everything like that. Yes. So it was, yeah. Yes. But I will provide you the documents for that, Marilyn.
And then there was an interesting thing right on Mark Street too, dealing with Sam's Cooking. I just took the corner to get started.
Yes, and I did reach out. Bill had sent me the information for that one. They did not apply for a building permit. They did not apply for a certificate of appropriateness. It's my understanding that the building department has issued multiple stop work orders for that property. This is a very good example of having to continue to issue multiple stop work orders at a property and fines. I believe Brad walked by the other day and they had stopped doing work, correct? But
I think the challenge here, I think that what we had heard was they were refusing to stop for some period of time. And I don't know what occurs when that situation comes up. I think the challenge, I don't know about that particular case, is some of these materials literally can't be replaced. So it really requires quick sort of action to prevent the loss of material in some cases. And that's, I don't know, I know I walked by the home and that's not them.
so,
I got one more.
yep, go for it.
How about Western Avenue, the painting of that building, the leaves, actually building that, and then they had to start painting. Well, they were continuing to paint that, it was supposed to be, but it's actually coming, other than the fact that they painted the white glazed brick. They've done a good job, but I don't know if that was approved or whether.
They're continuing up the brick face?
All the way up. All the way up.
Because I have the application for that. I've been putting together because paint is a minor certificate of appropriateness. So the way that I have to do this for this one is issue a denial and forward it to you all. So I was going to have it on the next agenda for the HRC. So it was going to be coming before you. So I will inform the building department to send an inspector out. So yeah, the building department will be going out to the site. So. Because I did have a discussion with the contractor for that, Chris, after when they initially started painting, and did inform them that, they hadn't applied for their exterior, for the paint permit or the certificate of appropriateness for that work. And that they either had the option to remove the paint, the work that they had already done, and remove it and possibly just clean the brick so that it, reflects it's a hard face blonde brick building, or apply and come to the HRC. So they decide to apply and they'll be coming before the HRC. So. I will.
What is that address again?
152 Western Avenue.
Close, or behind the Eloise, first building behind the Eloise. Okay, south.
Any other buildings?
I was south.
Okay.
So when I have the new recommendations,
You do? Okay.
vacant building inspection, dedicated code official with historic preservation training and responsibilities to coordinate with the HRC and city preservation staff should be assigned to inspection and additional code responsibilities for vacant historic properties and engage in all ERC emergency actions in historic districts.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So also next.
Perfect.
All right. Are there any other matters that come before us this evening? We have exhausted ourselves. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
I like for the motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor? Thank you all.
Thank you.